No, I'm still following it. In fact, I asked for a lot of records recently from the US government on their testing of phones, and I'm still waiting to get a response. So we'll see how long that takes. No, I think they're much more aware. I think there's a lot of debate in the United States and elsewhere about the dangers of cell phones. It's hotly debated. There are people on both sides of the issue, but one thing everyone wants to know is how much radiation is being emitted from these phones. And I don't think people really know that. We can't just take Apple's word for it. We can't take Samsung's word for it. They say their phones are safe, but when we take the phones to a lab and have them tested, they're over the legal limit. They're over the safety limit. So I think the first thing people need to be aware of is what is the true exposure of these phones. I don't think anyone really knows that. We tested 11 phones, but that's just 11 phones. There are dozens and dozens of phones out there. We need to be testing all of them. Yes, so we tested 11 phones and several of them came up over the legal safety limit. The iPhone 7 performed the worst, which is interesting because the iPhone 7 is one of the most popular cell phones ever made. And we tested several iPhone 7s. They all came up well over the 1.6 standard. It was all between 2 and 3. And not only was it over the legal safety limit, the iPhone 7 was double the amount of what Apple was reporting to the federal government. In order for the Apple to bring a new phone to market, it has to pass the certain tests, and they report a number. And what we found is that number was half as much as what they should have been reporting. Samsung was similarly high. It did better than Apple, but when at the 2mm test, as if someone were carrying a Samsung in their pocket, that was extraordinarily high. And same with Motorola. They all did better at the 5mm or 10mm distance, but when you tested the phone as how people carry their phones, like this, if it's in your pocket, they were all failing the test. So all three major manufacturers here showed really high results.
What was crazy, Sam, that no one of the iPhone 7 tested was compliant because you have a lower level of SAR in United States. It's 1.6 watt by kilo for 1 gram, and no one you have been tested was compliant. You agree with with what I say?
Yeah, I mean, the iPhone 7, we tested multiple phones. That was the first phone we tested. And in fact, it was my phone. It was the phone that I had. So I sent it to a lab out of curiosity to see how much radiation was emitting from my own phone. And when it came up high, I thought, well, I need to buy a brand new phone. So I went to the store and we bought iPhone 7s. And again, it was the same results. They were very consistent. They weren't all over the place. I think if the numbers were bouncing around, it would give me pause, but the numbers were consistently high. And then when I went to Apple and asked for a response, they said, well, you're doing the test wrong. I said, I'm not doing the test wrong. We're doing it exactly the way the government wants us to do the test. And they said, well, that's not how we do it. And I said, well, how do you do it? And they told me how they did it. We went back and we tested it the way Apple does it, and it was still high. And at that point, Apple said, okay, well, we're not going to talk to you anymore. So I have yet to test an Apple iPhone 7 that's in compliance. And I challenge anyone to go test an Apple iPhone 7. I think they're all over the legal safety limit. No, Samsung, I can look, the Samsung phones were very high too, especially when we tested them close to the body. 8.22. I mean, that is, 4 times higher than the legal safety limit. Motorola, very similar, over the limit. So those are very popular phones here in the United States and elsewhere. Again, testing well over the limit when held close to the body. Well, there has been a class action lawsuit in this country in several states where lawyers are trying to get people to join together. They are suing Apple, they're suing Samsung for fraud, saying that these companies should have told them the truth about the amount of radiation coming from their phones. So that lawsuit is ongoing. It could take years to resolve. What I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to get records from the United States government about their dealings with these manufacturers, because as Mark suggested, the government isn't always out looking for the consumers. They are very business friendly. The Federal Communications Commission in the United States, one of their main missions is to promote business. And so testing phones and taking them off the market does not promote business. It's exactly the opposite of what they're sort of charged with doing. And that's the problem in the United States. There's not an agency that oversees cell phone use, and it falls through the cracks. And so it takes people like myself maybe and Mark to sort of step in and expose some of these problems. Well, that's interesting. That's what Apple and Motorola told me, that they have sensors in their phone where if you take a phone and you move it toward an object, whether it's my face or a computer, the sensors will activate and the radiation goes down. So in testing, that should work, because when you put the phone up to the testing apparatus, the sensors should kick in. I do think the manufacturers have used that as an excuse to dispute the results, saying that we don't understand how their sensors work. But anybody should be able to go into a store, buy a phone, and have it tested. You shouldn't need any secret software. You shouldn't need any permission from Apple or Motorola. You should just be able to buy it off the shelf and have it tested. And that's what we did. Just like you buy a phone off the shelf and you start using it, and then you're exposed to radiation. So these companies saying that they have secret software and we don't know how to do the tests. I just think they're being evasive, and I don't think they're being truthful. Yeah, I think it's a public health scandal. I mean, when you have one of the most popular tech products of all time being carried around by millions of children in their pocket every day, that could potentially harm them long term, yeah, that's a huge scandal. And especially when the manufacturers and the government aren't releasing the true numbers and the true exposure, yeah, that's really scandalous. We have a right to know how much radiation is coming from our phones. I mean, that seems pretty basic, doesn't it? You would think, but it sounds like in America and France, it's a struggle. I don't know why, but it is. No, they just weren't entirely truthful. No, I'm just gonna say, I hope you continue your work, Mark. I mean, you're one of the few people in the world, really, who is doing this, who is pushing this issue and talking about cell phone testing and the results. And I think more people need to do that. I'm going to be like Mark. I'm going to work it out my whole life. Yes. And thanks for having me. And congratulations, Mark, for doing such great work. I admire your work and I hope you keep it up.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Sam. Bye.